So, Castlevania is dead. If the series was a vampire, then erotic violence pachinko is the busty wooden stake that pierced its heart. So what better time is there to look back at older Castlevania games? Probably when they first came out, but I suppose after this horrible mess we really do have all the time in the world. It's about time I finally wrap up my videos on the Castlevania Adventure games. But a lot has changed since the release of Belmont's Revenge and the release of the next game, Castlevania Legends. 6 years have passed and Symphony of the Night has just come out, blowing everyone away. Couple this with Belmont's Revenge being one of the best Game Boy games out there were obviously high expectations surrounding this game. What could they do to top their last attempt? More levels, better graphics, hell, maybe even a Symphony of the Night styled game? The possibilities were endless. Well, before I get you too hyped up, let me just deflate that excitement by saying that Castlevania Legends is just a standard Castlevania game. Allow me to further deflate your excitement by saying that Castlevania Legends sucks. How badly, you ask? Well, think of every Castlevania game ever released. All the good ones, all the bad ones, and everything in between. Out of all of those games, Castlevania Legends is the only one that is removed from canon, with the producer of the series calling it an embarrassment. Suddenly I'm not looking forward to playing this one, guys. At first, the game does start off looking pretty good. There's an intro cutscene with a wall of text which manages to basically explain nothing, preceded by a really nice image of Sonia Belmont stood in front of Dracula's castle. And you know, I really can't help but feel sorry for her. She got to be in 2 Castlevania games, the first being this one, and the second being one that never got released. Now, unlike Belmont's Revenge, this game doesn't have a level select feature and instead just dumps you straight into the first level. And this is where the first warning sign that this game is gonna suck loudly shouts at you. Warning sign 1. The music. Let's just say there's a very good reason I'm not using any music from this game in this video, and it's not because it's bad. The music itself is actually pretty good, but the problem is that all the songs are just 20-second loops. I don't care how good Bloody Tears is, after hearing it repeat for the 100th time, it's going to start making you cry bloody tears. Now throughout this game, you will get to fight against some of Castlevania's most well-known and beloved enemies. You have the Bat, of course, which has probably been in more Castlevania games than Dracula himself, but who could forget these other great staples of the series, such as Ghost of Chameleon, slowly moving what I assume is a fireball but honestly looks more like a clump of hair to me, and of course, stripy scarves. If they aren't to your taste, then there's always the Knights, who move like they've shat themselves, something that looks like the shaft of a penis with a mouth coming out of it, and who could forget the bosses? I mean, it's got everything from death to Batman. And this is warning sign number 2. What the fuck are these enemies? Throughout the entire game, you honestly never encounter more than I'd say about 7 different enemy types, which can make the game feel really repetitive, which I suppose complements the looping music quite well. Well, now that I've defecated all over this game, I suppose I better talk about some of the good things it actually does. Because while the game as a whole isn't perhaps as good as Belmont's Revenge, it at least isn't as bad as the Adventure was, nor is it as bad as I think Koji made it out to be. For starters, you can really feel the Symphony of the Night influences in this game. It isn't completely open exploration, but there are alternate paths you can go down in the levels to get extra items and stuff. Now, the item that you get at the end of the path is normally just a health pickup, which barely makes up for the health you lost getting to it in the first place, but hey, it makes the levels a bit more interesting. Sonia is also more athletic than her handheld counterparts, so while she does still move so frickin' slowly, you can now control her in mid-air, and even crouch walk like in Castlevania 4. It also does something different with the sub-weapon system, and by that I mean it gets rid of it. While the sub-weapons are still in the game, they are now just collectibles, and instead you get a new magic spell at the end of each level. For example, after finishing the first level, you get the Tornado spell, which of course freezes time, as tornadoes are known to do. It's a neat little concept, and it could have been really cool if the spells were actually useful. Let's see here, you have the one that slightly damages enemies on screen, the one that kills everything on screen, so I'm not sure what the point of that last one is, and there's one that fires a projectile in front of you, which your whip does anyway, so okay, cool, thanks. The only one that is actually helpful is the one that lets you fully heal yourself. It also makes the game pretty easy, but trust me, I am not complaining. Now herein lies the biggest problem with this game. It isn't hard, but it is incredibly frustrating. Kinda like sex if you suffer from erectile dysfunction. Come on guys, we've all been there now. Right? It's not hard because of 2 things. One being a reduced blood flow around the Yeah, that's not supposed to be in there. 1 being the ability to heal yourself as long as you have 20 hearts on you, and 2 being a special ability you can activate called Blazing Mode. Basically, it's an ability that can be used once per life by pressing A and B at the same time that makes you invincible for about 10 seconds. Now, I know that activating an ability by pressing down the only 2 buttons this game uses at the same time sounds like a terrible idea, and trust me, I know. But it basically gives you a free pass through all the game's bosses, as you can defeat them way before the 10 seconds is even over. And when I say all the bosses, I literally mean all of them. Saying that Dracula in this game is easier than in Simon's Quest would not be an overstatement. Now, the frustrating side of things comes from how the levels themselves are designed. It's almost like Konami learned nothing from making Belmont's Revenge, but looked at the adventure and was like, yes, we want more of this. So although jumping controls are the best the series has had, there are now no longer any platforming sections, and we are instead greeted by long, boring corridors, with an enemy or 2 thrown in to make sure the player doesn't go brain dead. On top of this, it really feels like they went out of their way to put enemies in just the worst places possible. See, the cool thing about old Castlevania games is that you can only attack in 2 directions. So therefore, the best thing to do is to get enemies that come at you from all directions, and then purposely place them above or below the player so they have no chance of hitting them. And it honestly didn't occur to me why they did this so much throughout the entire game until later, but I think it's because they have no idea how to make any other enemy types. Man, it sure would have been bad if that guy could hit me. Oh god, it sure would have been bad if I couldn't just walk past all these guys. Oh golly, imagine how bad it would have been if this enemy didn't stay completely still so I couldn't hit him. To be honest, the only place where they become an actual pain is in the trap rooms, another brilliant idea this game brought to the table. Throughout the entire game you will find these differently coloured candles, and if you hit them, you get teleported to a trap room, where enemies continuously spawn until you kill all of them. Gee, doesn't that sound like a brilliant idea? So what's the reward for beating one of these rooms? Well, you get to leave the room, which is very thoughtful of them to let you do that. Warning sign, I forgot what number I was on. The graphics. The graphics in this game suck, okay? Let's not beat around the bush here. While it does have some totally awesome art when it comes to the character portraits, everything else is just super flat and incredibly boring to look at. From really poor animation to sometimes none at all, backgrounds and enemies often lack the detailed shading that really made them pop out in Belmont's Revenge, and at times it can actually be distracting. And by that I mean I can't get over how the bricks in level 4 look like someone spazzed out with the square tool in Microsoft Paint. Which is weird because the cutscene graphics are actually pretty well detailed, so if only some of that effort could have been put into the rest of the game. And really, Castlevania Legends is a really big shame when you consider that one little addition could have turned it from a sucky game into an okay game. If the player could attack in multiple directions like they could in Castlevania 4, then this would have gotten rid of the main cause of frustration in this game. Of course it wouldn't have saved it from having pretty terrible level design overall, but at the very least it wouldn't be infuriating to play through. Now at this point you're probably not wondering what collecting all the sub-weapons in this game does, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because I already wrote it down. Now there's a different collectible hidden in every level, and collecting all of them will unlock a different ending. But before you reach the ending, you of course have to fight Dracula, and oh boy, that is something I cannot resist looking over. So you get to him, wail on him while you're invincible, and then he enters his second form. And I'm gonna give you a heads up here guys, I had to pause the game the first time I reached him because of how hard I was laughing. Now I present to you, the Lord of Darkness. Just soak it in all of its beauty. Now I'm not sure about you guys, but to me it looks like someone threw up, then shaped it into what I think is supposed to be a dragon, and then threw a decapitated pig's head randomly onto it. It's just, they couldn't have made him look less threatening if they tried. Now typically the game ends with Sonia looking at the castle as it collapses, so after you've meticulously searched every level, including the hidden bonus level for every sub-weapon, how are you rewarded for your efforts? Well, you get Sonia looking over the castle as it collapses, but with her hair down. Better savor those 2 frames of animation, guys, because we earned it. Castlevania Legends then. More like Castlevania, anything but a legend, am I right? Well, definitely not as bad as the Adventure. Let's face it, that isn't exactly that big of an achievement. While it does have some good in it, the bad definitely weighs it down, with worse music, worse graphics, worse gameplay, and generally just worse everything when compared to Belmont's Revenge. Even when judged on its own, it's kinda hard to recommend because of how goddamn frustrating it is to play. I would only check it out if you're really interested in it. For anyone else, I would recommend Belmont's Revenge. And so that basically wraps up my series of videos on the Castlevania Adventure games. I mean, it's not like 20 years later, Konami would release a remake of the first Adventure game on something really obscure like Nintendo WiiWare. Right?